Buffalo Bills at the Cincinnati Bengals. Of course, we had last year's Monday night game with the Hamlin incident. We did not get to see that entire game. It looked like it was going to be epic before that game ended up getting canceled. They did have the rematch in the playoffs last year in Buffalo in the snow. Cincinnati Bengals came out on top in the divisional round to go to the AFC Championship. Both teams in slightly different spots this year. Bengals have really started slow but looking better in recent weeks, and the Bills, at points in this year look like the best team in the league, but they've dealt with some injuries and some inconsistency. So right now, we've got 2 4-3 teams, and the Bengals favored by 2. And I think I'm going to the game. I think I'll be there.
Yeah?
In the stands.
Huh. What a weird...
Talk to our friends at NBC.
Huh. Yeah. What a weird game this must be for Hamlin. Yeah. I mean, whatever about, they played again last year, but it was in different place. Obviously he was in a different spot, but now, back with the team, back playing, and it's literally a repeat. It's prime time in Cincinnati like that. I can't even imagine what that guy's week must look like, or what must be going through his mind going into this game. Just I honestly can't even. I don't know what that would do to you. Are you in a weird world of sort of reliving it? Are you looking forward to sort of trying to put things right by this? I literally can't even put myself in that position of imagining what must be going through the guy's brain this week.
Yeah, not even really going to try, other than probably at least some level of thankfulness. And I'm sure they're going to cover it quite a bit on the Sunday night broadcast and, honor the people that helped save his life and everything. So overall, it ended up being a good story in the end. Right. So that's the key. I did misspeak earlier. The Bills are 5-3, not 4-3. So slightly ahead of.
Dropping misinformation everywhere.
Yeah, tend to do that. But I correct it. I'm willing to correct it. So Bengals by 2 here. Remember, last week, Cincinnati, Joe Burrow's been creeping back to Joe Burrow over the last few weeks, and I think last week was full go, making plays outside of structure, accuracy, getting the ball down the field, barely missing a throw. And, yeah, there's a lot to like about where the Bengals are trending right now, plus that defense is looking like the Bengals defense of the last couple of years, where Trey Hendrickson's been one of the best edges in the league. DJ Reader, almost impossible to run his way. Mike Hilton playing better in the slot. And Bills-Bengals, man, love this matchup.
Yeah, I mean, I would say Cincinnati has been trending back towards being the Super Bowl contending team that we thought they were before their ugly start to the season, whereas I don't think Buffalo has been. Like, the Bills have been shaky the last few weeks and not necessarily looking like that true Super Bowl contender, even with Josh Allen playing out of his mind for a couple of weeks. Early in the season, it was kind of like meltdown from Josh Allen week 1, a couple of shaky games from Allen, and you're like, they're vulnerable to those games where if Allen doesn't play well, that takes an awful lot away. But then what was maybe even more concerning is Allen played really well for a while, and they still didn't blow teams out. So I think you have 2 teams where the Bengals started off completely lowered expectations because Burrow was hurt and everything was bad. Now the Bengals look back, but the Bills have been kind of wobbling. And I don't know if going after a guy like Rasul Douglas before the trade deadline was an indication that they think they need some help, and an acknowledgement that things haven't been going great. But I do feel like these 2 teams, despite being in a similar place record-wise, I mean, obviously Buffalo's better, but trending in the same kind of area, it feels like they're moving in opposite directions.
Yeah, Buffalo's different this year because they're just not beating up on the bad teams like they used to. Now, they lost to New England 2 weeks ago. I think they had that Bucs game in hand, but I think the old Bills, or the Bills from the last couple of years, would have dropped the hammer when they were up a couple scores. Instead, the Bucs had this long drive to come back and actually had a Hail Mary that could have lost them the game. So the Bills have been just kind of like teetering against the good teams, or against like okay teams or whatever. So I think that's why it doesn't feel as good, but I still feel good about Buffalo as a team. I love bringing Rasul Douglas in. They also signed run stuffer, Linval Joseph. They rented a run stuffer like the Eagles did last year with big Linval Joseph. One of your favorite pastimes last year was checking the film to just see how how big Linval Joseph looked sitting over at nose tackle last year. I'm curious what another year's going to look like.
He looks very big. He looks like late career Grady Jackson, where he would just sort of, was it the Lions that signed him right at the end? And his job was to literally stand up at the snap, lean forward, and occupy 2 gaps, maybe 3. Like, it's going to take 2 guys not to block you out of the way, but just to stop you collapsing on the offensive line, right? 2 offensive linemen were employed in simply propping up Grady Jackson at the line of scrimmage, and then that would chew up 2 different gaps, and everybody else would try and, stuff the rest of the run play. That's what Linval is looking like these days.
You always say Grady Jackson. I always say Ted Washington. Same idea, though. Guys that were listed at 320 that were closer to 420.
Right. Or who's the guy? Ted Washington's a good one. Who, the Gravedigger, the Packers guy, what's his name?
Oh, Gilbert Brown.
Yes, yeah. Gilbert Brown. That's another one.
Yeah, because usually you throw your weight is whatever you entered the league at, right. And then 10 years later it's like
Pat Williams, 317.
Yeah.
I showed you that thing, right? Pat Williams and Michael Hoyt. There's like 6 pounds enlisted difference between the 2 of them.
Yeah, pretty much the same guy.
Yeah.
One of my questions for you. So the Bengals, we're halfway through the season. They started slow. You can maybe excuse some of it because of Joe Burrow's calf and what have you, but they started slow last year as well. And then Cincinnati went on this run where they had a stretch of games where they beat a whole bunch of good teams, including the Chiefs and everybody that was up that they were that was pretty good that came up against them. Last week it was the Niners. The Bengals kind of have to do something similar here if they're going to compete for catching the Ravens in the AFC North, competing for that number 1 seed as everyone expected that they would. Can Cincinnati do that again? Is my one question. And then the second one is, we talk a lot about matchups in football. We got about a quarter plus of action in that Monday Night Football game, the Hamlin game, and Cincinnati's offense looked really good against Buffalo. Mm-hmm. And then they did again in the playoff game. We don't have a ton of evidence right now. It's a game plus what these 2 teams matched up over the last couple of years. Is this one where the Bengals just kind of have the Bills' number? Is it going to turn out to be one of those types of matchups?
I mean, not even necessarily the Bills' number. Like the Bengals, when they're playing at their best, which I think you can say they are at the moment, they seem to beat the best teams. I mean, they've had Kansas City's number every time except that one game, which they almost had,
3 in a
and it required a guy, shoving Mahomes out of bounds to extend the drive, et cetera. Like they had that one won as well. They just beat San Francisco pretty handily. They have had the Bills number. Like the Bengals have quietly been that team where when they're at their best, they seem to be better than the other teams. And somehow they've only made the 1 Super Bowl and lost that one when they got there. But like you can make a case that Cincinnati's best is better than the other team's bests.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm getting at here. So I think I'm leaning Cincinnati. A couple other things to watch here. Josh Allen, we've maybe unfairly referenced his Week 1 game against the Jets so many times. I don't know if you looked at this recently, but he had 4 turnover-worthy plays in that game, and he has 3 since that point. Josh Allen's playing a different brand of football this season, especially since Week 1. It is high completion percentage, taking a lot of the underneath stuff, not actually putting the ball in harm's way, because he also had a couple turnover-worthy plays in Week 3 against Washington. Allen's played really clean since that point. I know he has 5 interceptions since Week 1, but only 3 turnover-worthy plays. So there's some interception bad luck in there from Josh Allen. The other thing I'm intrigued by with Buffalo, with the Dalton Knox injury, rookie Dalton Kincaid comes in on the Thursday night game against Tampa Bay. They're running a little bit more up-tempo, no huddle. I love the flexibility that they were tapping into with Dalton Kincaid because he's a Travis Kelce type, right? You can line up in line if you need to, but you really want him moving all over the formation. Buffalo can line up in anything in their 11 personnel package, 1 tight end, 3 wide receivers. They can do anything they want, and I love that flexibility. I'm curious to see if they're going to break that out against the Bengals here Sunday night.
Well, the other thing is, did you see the other thing that changed in that Tampa Bay game was Gabe Davis had a completely different role than he normally has.
Yeah.
Like Gabe Davis's average depth of target is usually like 13, right? He's the deep target. He's the guy that is trying to make big plays deep down the field, and that's I think part of the reason people tend to get frustrated with it is that's by definition a low percentage play, right? So sometimes it's going to work out great, and he's going to have a Jerry Rice game in the playoffs, and sometimes it's not, and you're going to be like, why isn't Gabe Davis better than he should, than this? Why are we not getting more out of him? And part of that is because like his average at the target for his career is 16 yards downfield, right? His average at the target against Tampa Bay was 6.9 yards downfield. So they more than halved, if you look at his career numbers, but halved basically this season, his average at the target in that game. He completely transformed what they were asking of him to do, and he had 12 targets in that game, 9 catches. 12 targets is the most in a single game this season by 4 for Gabe Davis, and 9 catches is 3 more than any other game he had this year. With Dawson Knox out, like one of their pivots was to completely change what they asked of Gabe Davis, and it worked.
Shakir has played pretty well, and they're getting him involved. So I feel like Buffalo's offense is finding their way. You just described it pretty well. They're finding their way, and I think we might see a lot of points on both sides of the ball. So let's go. Bengals are favored by 2 here. Where are you leaning on this one?
I've talked myself into Cincinnati being the better team.
Yeah. I'll take the big game Bengals here. I'll take them to cover the 2.
Big game Bengals.
Yeah, that's what they are. That's how they've been. Right, Eli, back there? Isn't that what you? Yeah, a mighty roar. See, I hope people can hear that.
No, they can't.
There's no way.
They definitely. We got a whoop from the.
We got a
booth.
Ric Flair style whoop from the booth. So we're both taking Cincinnati.